Moderator, it's sort of my prerogative to ask a couple of the first questions. So I want to go straight to the heart of the matter that both of you have discussed, and Bill as well, you touched on this. It's an important part of your philosophy for your organization. It's clear the importance of value and value of work to improve well-being and to improve self-sufficiency and life satisfaction. So, and I think it's definitely a key to going from sort of this handout mentality to a self-sufficiency mentality. And so everybody agrees, I believe here, that work is an important part of the system, including making changes in welfare programs. But how effective can this be? And here's my point. How effective can this be when we don't have strong growth policies in the country, when we don't have a strong growing economy, and a lot of employers simply are not hiring? So how do you address that? Maybe you can start with that, Robert.
Well, in my experience, is the you have to have an engagement mentality. In other words, you have to have a program that provides the discipline and rigor and daily activity that that comes with work. And so that when people apply for assistance, if there aren't jobs, if that's really the question, what do you do when there aren't jobs? I think, and this for those of us who don't like bureaucracy or are a little uncomfortable with government, need to recognize that sometimes you have to create an atmosphere whereby people that are in need of assistance and seek assistance are put into a situation where they are replicating the daily activities of work, so they know that that's part of the deal. And that often leads to people stepping up and finding opportunities. So I think that that's often an excuse for others to say, just provide the assistance, there are no jobs, what can you do? And so the answer is to say, well, no, we can have a program like Bill's. We can have a program like we had in New York City that was a work opportunity or a work fair program. When you do that, I think what happens is people find their way to real employment, or they complete a personal responsibility requirement associated with the receipt of assistance.
Okay, great. And Bill, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know if this is on. Yes, I couldn't agree more. When a man comes into Georgia Works, he's coming from a very unstructured environment. He's been lying around, perhaps downtown outside, or going from shelter to shelter, but living on his calendar, on his schedule. He has had horrible role models. So we have all, many of us have all had, most of us had fathers in our lives who have given us advice on how to act, and he's been lacking that. So when he comes in, we put structure around him. He's got to get up at a certain time. He's got to do his chores. He's got to go to his AA or NA meetings, get his breakfast, and then start participating in work, even if it's going around downtown picking up the trash, which helps the community look better. And but it also, he gets to see what it's like to be on a team of people and work. For those of you who are retired in here, I bet you tried that for a little while, and then you went right back to doing something. And that's because you enjoy working, you get the satisfaction of accomplishing things, you enjoy being part of a team. But those are the things that are lacking a lot of times in our participants' lives when they come in. So on a second note, there's a lot of jobs out there. If you go on snagajob.com, probably a site you've never heard of before, there's about 2,500 jobs in the city of Atlanta, around Atlanta, all between $8 and $10 an hour. A lot of them aren't fast food jobs, or they're located in the wrong spot and all that. So there's jobs. So our guys have to have that mentality when they go out and get that job. It might be a $9 an hour job, working in a kitchen somewhere or something like that, that's the opportunity to audition for the supervisor job at $12, $15, 20 hours. So they have to change their mindset to a mindset of, oh, I'm just going to get a paycheck, to this is my chance to get a better job.
Okay. And Logan, are there some states that do a better job of implementing work requirements that might be models to turn to?
Well, I would just say implementing immediate work requirements, which is what 41 of the states do. We mention in our report card, we say work is at the heart of a happy and a healthy life. So we understand the importance of work. If you look at full-time employees, less than 3% of them live in poverty. Even part-time employment, less than 15% of them live in poverty. So we understand the importance of work as far as trying to be able to find work with the TANF program. And Robert mentioned this a little bit. There are 12 different programs you can be enrolled in. One of the co-authors of our study, Gary McDougall, he was influential in kind of overhauling the welfare program in Illinois. And this goes back to the service integration portion of it, where you're connecting people who need to find employment with people like Bill and Georgia Works, or with employers. And Gary did that with UPS in Illinois, where he, with caseworkers, were able to connect with local employers and provide, or show them opportunities for employment.
Great. And I want to talk a little bit about, you've touched on the importance of reshaping the welfare programs to include work requirements, but what more can government do to remove barriers to opportunity and work for individuals? How much of a difference, for example, do reforms to occupational licensing, what kind of barriers do they create? And how might this also play a role in freeing up opportunity for folks who need jobs?
Well, they play a big role. I mean, the president or the Congress or the state legislatures or the governors need to have focus like a laser beam on any activity that prevents the rapid establishment of a business or the employment of people. Just to be constantly focused. And occupational licenses can, prevent people who want to start a business from getting started, and we ought to work hard to reform that. I also think the Affordable Care Act is a big disincentive to hire people. I have a colleague on the National Hunger Commission who runs grocery stores and stores across the South in the United States, and they are limiting their starting level employees to 30 hours or less than 30 hours
Right.
because of the rules involving health insurance. Now, let me say something. 29 hours isn't bad, but some people need that extra 10 hours to get a full-time job to be able to support their children and the family the way they want to. So we can talk about minimum wage hikes, but if you don't get 40 hours, you're not going to be able to support your family. So there's just all kinds of ways in which our government policies don't encourage employment enough.
Yeah, great, very great points. I want to congratulate all the Georgia folks in the audience. I know you've passed the state has passed some very important criminal justice reforms recently that do help remove or improve opportunity, help reentry, have alternatives to incarceration. I know one of the steps that the governor recently did is to do away with the ban the box movement. That requires job applicants to disclose felony or prior felonies, and that's something that Koch Industries was also proud to make happen in their employment applications. But I just wanted to touch very briefly on those and to congratulate you all for those. Those are the end of my questions that I have for this panel. Let's open it up to you. If you can just maybe turn the lights up a tiny bit so we can see, and I know there's some folks with microphones. I see one hand right there. We get a microphone to you, sir, and if you could make sure to ask a question and just let us know who you are and what your affiliation is.
Oh, hi, this is Terry Taylor. Thank you all for your presentations. They were terrific. I have a question on mobility, and I'm thinking in many cases in Georgia, you have deeply rooted poverty in the rural areas where there are just no jobs, and it's not just Georgia, it's throughout the country. Do you know of any countries that have encouraged mobility either through support through the government or some kind of program that can move people to areas where there are jobs? And I'm wondering as well is that, are there things that need to accompany that if you move somebody who is woefully unskilled from a small town to a big town, he or she may not be successful just in making that move. And is there anything that needs to accompany that to make it work best? Thank you.
Logan, you want to take that? Logan or Robert?
I can't completely touch on that just because we're looking at it from a state level, but I can give one example of what one state did when there are areas where there aren't jobs available. Michigan implemented stop the clock provision in their time limits, which basically means if a municipality unemployment rate goes below a certain percentage, it doesn't go towards their lifetime limits. If there's any kind of medical issue, that doesn't go towards their lifetime limits. So that's a policy to look at. I don't know if Robert might be able to touch on
Yeah,
as far as mobility.
I have a colleague at AEI, Michael Strain, who wrote a pretty good article in National Affairs called "The Jobs Agenda for the Right," and he talked about relocation assistance and a program that would allow people who had job opportunities or job offers in one location to get some assistance to move themselves and their families to that place where there was a much stronger economy. I am supportive of that. I think that's a good idea. I think one of the problems we have in poverty alleviation rhetoric is that we get the idea that we ought to do everything we can to allow people to stay exactly where they are, even if that means there's no opportunity there and there's no work. And I think that sometimes our assistance programs prevent people from facing up to the fact that if they move to a place where housing was much more affordable and jobs more available, that they'd be better off. There are many studies on relocation that show that people that move do better. Just in general, now there's some selection bias there because they're the kind of people that have the guts to get up and move. But I know in the city that I worked in New York City, they're spending an enormous amount of time trying to find ways to keep people on assistance in the city when there are opportunities in other parts of the country where their families and themselves would, I think, would do better than remaining in the city dependent on government handouts.
Thanks, Robert. And question back here.
Arthur Freeman from Brookhaven, Georgia. We have an interesting situation that we have 3 cities along what is known as the Buford Highway Corridor, where we have poverty levels of almost 32%. Within that group, we have what I refer to as an underground economy, which are either undocumented or new immigrants, which are taking quite a few of the jobs, but we're not picking them up in our counts because they're not visible. How are you addressing this issue?
So I am a believer in our nation as an attractor of people from around the world to come and prosper and do well here. On the other hand, it is just not honest to not admit that low-skilled immigration and illegal immigration is not helpful to workers in the United States who want to get that first ladder on the rung and move up. And so I believe that we need to do more to ensure that that competition does not occur for people that are really struggling, that are here, citizens in the United States. One way that I've discussed facing up to that in New York City was to be sure that the rules concerning receipt of assistance concerning undocumented immigrants were enforced properly. So there was not that added incentive to attract people to the United States. So it's a big problem, and for people that are thinking about trying to help the least fortunate among us, it is not honest to not admit that that extra competition makes it harder for people to get into the workforce.
That being said, though, the scarce commodity isn't the jobs in Atlanta. We have a lot of jobs at the price point that we were talking about before. The scarce commodity is men with good habits. And so even though we do have that problem, if we had men with good habits, they can get jobs. They're not being crowded out by illegal immigrants. So so what we have to work on is the homeless men. That's what we have to work on, and that takes a comprehensive approach.
Can I also mention, because I thought your presentation was so good, and the 2 gentlemen who spoke were so good, there was an aspect that they said that was extremely important that is not said enough in social policy. They said both very emphatically they could not have succeeded until they themselves recognized that they had to do it. So much of what we do in America with government public policy is tell people that we'll do it for them. And if we don't begin first by saying, we may be able to help, but you have to take responsibility and agency and recognize that you're in this game, then we won't really help people enough. And so I think that was, in some ways, the most important lesson we heard today, was the importance of communicating to people that the first step is their own heart, recognizing that they have a role in bringing themselves up.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. I've got another one over here. Do we have time for two, Kelly? Okay. Here and then here. Yes.
Good morning, Travis Stiegel from DeKalb County and the CPLI 2016 class. Have a question for you, Bill. It was encouraging to hear you say two things, being a nonprofit. The first thing is that I hope to one day eradicate the homelessness and also literally put myself out of business. The second thing is you said that there are other larger organizations that are in the same track that you're in that cause more of an enabling type of situation when they're trying to service. So I guess my question to you is that what can we do to have larger organizations think more like you? Because the goal is to help people and send them on their way, opposed to have this medical type of program if they stay sick, we stay paid.
I'll try to be politically correct here, but have anybody here heard of Peachtree and Pine homeless shelter? We got some hands that have gone out in the back. So we have a homeless shelter in Atlanta called Peachtree and Pine, which is a low barrier shelter. The concept of a low barrier shelter is that they're going to meet people where they are. They're not going to require a change in their behavior in order to engage them, to give them services. That's the concept. And I have no problem with that concept. The issue with Peachtree and Pine, in my personal opinion, is that it's extremely large, and there's a lot of, they enable a population in Atlanta, and it's located right next to the Bank of America building in Midtown Atlanta. They enable these people to continue to act the way that they've been acting in the past. So we have a lot of drug addicts, a lot of severely mentally ill, a lot of people who are not engaged in getting into the system to get help. So we have a provider who is just enabling a huge population to live on the streets of Atlanta. They have a TB problem, a health problem, I think hopefully my body English is coming across here, what I think of that. So that is a shelter, in my view, that has to be closed. That we needed to get those people into more effective programs. We have to make them change those behaviors, the people who are getting service there, because what they're doing right now isn't working. They're just enabling homeless people to live on the streets. And if you think I have a strong opinion about it, ask the people in our program, the participants, the clients in our program, about Peachtree and Pine.
So it seems that part of it is that the individuals really have to want to become self-sufficient. And another key part of that is accountability between the organization that would be providing the assistance and the recipient.
Right, and you have to surround, a lot of people want to make that decision, they want to get out, but then you have to surround them with the structure that they need in order to be successful, because they can't do it on their own.
Thank you. And the last question, right here, sir.
Hi, my name is Jim Wanzurski. I'm a business person here in Atlanta. This might be more for you, Bill. Are there other organizations that do the same thing as you do, where you could have a band of brothers to share best practices? I think I'm aware of one, which is the St. Patrick Center in St. Louis, that takes the funnel problems, pushes it all the way to self-sufficiency. Are there other organizations where we could export some of the things you're doing or import other best practices across the United States?
Well, I have copied, all my success in life has been on copying smarter people than me. So what I've done is, our program is based on the Ready, Willing, and Able program in New York, and there's other work-based programs in Philadelphia, Chicago. I've taken the best of those programs, put it into Georgia Works. We have huge advantages over those programs. Principally is that our cost of housing is much less than the housing cost in New York. There's almost 60,000 people living in the public shelters in the city of New York, half of which are working poor who can't afford just to get housing. Second thing that we've done, that's different than New York and other cities is that we've got private employers who we're contracting with. And why that's better for our men is they get to go work in real businesses and see how that works. And then half of them are getting hired by those businesses that they would never have ever gotten the opportunity to go work for based upon their history and their criminal records. Robert's going to go work for the Ritz-Carlton downtown. He's just got his full-time job offer. He's been in our program for 8 months. He would never have had the opportunity to get that based upon his history. So we have other cities that are coming into Georgia Works to see how we're doing. But we're all borrowing from one another and are very generous in helping other people get programs like this going.
Thank you. Well, please join me in thanking all of the panelists. And when I say all of the panelists, I also want to include Adolphus and Robert for their very moving stories and congratulate you on your success. Thank you.